Recently, I made a video on how many repetitions we should do to maximize our results according to science. Now, a lot of you have watched that video and I totally appreciate it. I also saw a lot of your questions in the comments, which, by the way, I love. I read all the questions, even if unfortunately, I don't get back to everybody, but I definitely read them and appreciate them. So thank you for that. The biggest question in the comments was to ask how to apply the strategy in practice. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to demonstrate all 3 repetition strategies that I mentioned in the last video. If you didn't see the last video, here's a quick recap of them. The first strategy was a combination of 2 strategies, which I like to call the 70 to 85% success rate strategy. The second one is the overlearning strategy, which is aimed more toward long-term retention. And then the last strategy is a strategy called Interleaved Practice. The 70% strategy, or 70-85% strategy, is broken up into 2 parts. The first part is the 70% strategy, which was a study that focused on developing motor skills quickly. And what researchers found was that participants who ended their repetitions with approximately a 70% success rate, in other words, a 30% error rate, ended up developing their motor skills faster. The other study, which was focused on cognitive skills, suggested an 85% success rate for cognitive skill development and long-term retention. Now, there's a caveat, which is that both of these studies are suggestive. I wouldn't think of these as definitive rules, only because there just is not a lot of research out there on either of these. I've only found 1 on the motor skill study, and I've only seen about 3 on the cognitive skill development strategy. Now, the motor skill study was a study on very simple motor tasks. It wasn't as something as complex as guitar. So again, this is suggestive, not definitive. And then the cognitive skill study was a study that they cite animal studies, and then they have a sort of an AI model on that, on the 85% success rate that's suggestive of what could be possible for human cognition. And the whole neuroscience world is enamored with this study, and it seems to work very well. So in any event, keep in mind, these are just suggestive. They're not hard numbers. They're not definitive solutions. They are starting points that I think are meant to be tweaked. The second study, I guess technically it's the third study, is the overlearning study, which is generally aimed at solidifying or stabilizing memories into long-term memory, right? The way the overlearning strategy works is to add between half the amount of repetitions it took you to get something right and up to 100% of the amount of repetitions it took you to get something right. So for example, if it takes you 4 times to get a phrase correct, then you would want to follow that up with 2 to 4 correct repetitions to help stabilize that into long-term memory. And then the last strategy that I mentioned is interleaving. Interleaved practice is a very well-studied strategy that helps learn things faster and retain things into long-term memory. And basically the idea is to work in sets. So instead of working on, for example, 3 different items independently, so item A 15 times, item B 15 times, item C 15 times, and then going on to something else, interleaved practice suggests that what we want to do is work on A, B, and C, but work on them in sets. For example, set 1 would be A 5 times, B 5 times, C 5 times. Set 2, same thing, 5 times each. And set 3 would be 5 times each. At the end of the day, we've worked on A, B, and C 15 times, but we've done it in sets in what's called interleaving. So it's mixed in with other items, other tasks. I also want to show you a quick chart that I made that will hopefully help you understand the difference between the 70 to 85% strategy and the overlearning strategy in terms of how many repetitions we would normally need to do for each. In the left column, we've got the 2 strategies. 70 to 85% success is on top, and then overlearning is on the bottom, and I've made 4 different examples here. So column 1 are the amount of errors. Column 2 are the corrections that we need to do according to what each strategy recommends. And then I also wanted to compare the success rates for each of these strategies based on the correction to error ratio. I mentioned an example of this in the last video, but I want to show you real quick for those of you who didn't get a chance to see that. Let's look at example number 2, where we have 2 errors for both the 70 to 85% success rate strategy and for the overlearning strategy. In the first one, the success rate strategy, that means we would have to do a minimum of 5 and a maximum of 11 repetitions for a success rate that's within the range, right? 71 to 85% success rate. In the overlearning strategy, 2 errors means we need to do a minimum of 3 and a maximum of 4 correct repetitions for 50 to 100% overlearning. So here, if we look at the number on the right side of the overlearning column for corrections, the one that I've got circled in brown, that's the upper limit that's recommended. That's the 100% overlearning strategy that's recommended in the research. So in this example with 2 errors, that means we only need to do a maximum of 4 correct repetitions for 100% overlearning. Once again, 100% overlearning means you take the total amount of repetitions that you did to get it right. In this case, it would be 2 wrong plus 1 right, right? So that's 3 repetitions. And then you need to do the same amount of total repetitions correctly after that. So that means 3 more, right? For a total of 6 repetitions. And that gives us 2 errors and 4 correct repetitions for 100% overlearning. What's really interesting about that, if you look at the arrow, is that the success rate for that strategy is 67%. And you can see that's fairly similar for the other ones, except for the 1 error strategy. All right, but the other ones are 60, 63, 67% in the example that we're looking at, which I think is very fascinating. Now, if we look at the 70 to 85% strategy that I have circled in purple, and then the arrows in purple, let's look at that second example again, just with the 2 errors. We see that for 71% success, we just need 5 repetitions and a maximum of 11 repetitions for an 85% success rate. Okay, so what does this mean? Now, again, this is just my interpretation of this information, of this research. And keep in mind, there's, once again, very little information, very little research on this stuff out there. So they are not definitive. These numbers are not fixed. You want to vary them depending on what you're doing, depending on your level, how difficult the music is, multiple factors. There's a lot of experimentation that can be done with this. So please keep that in mind. Once again, these are just starting points. They're just suggestions. They're not absolutes. So when I look at these examples, and I look at these strategies, if I look at the 70 to 85% strategy, for me, that tells me that I have more options in terms of my upper limit for learning. I can do more repetitions. If I feel like maybe I've ended a set, maybe in the example that I gave, I made 2 errors, I did 5 repetitions, but I'm just not feeling it. I think I need to do 1 more. And then I do 1 more, I'm like, nah, let me just do another one. I have that option to go higher, and I know, according to the research, that I'm not going to have any diminishing results. I'm actually going to potentially improve more. So that's how I look at it. And the 70 to 85% success rate strategy is a strategy that I use when I'm actively trying to improve a passage. I have not necessarily reached my goal. Now, when I use the overlearning passage, now I'm thinking of it a little bit differently. I'm thinking of an upper limit, right? I know that in general, I want to at least try not to go past that high number. So in the example I gave before, for 2 errors, I really shouldn't do more than 4 correct repetitions for the 100% overlearning to help stabilize those corrections into long-term memory. Again, I've achieved my goal. I'm not intending to improve that anymore. All I want to do is make sure that in the long run, I can reproduce the same passage correctly when I perform, right? So that's my goal in overlearning. I'm going to demonstrate all 3 strategies with a piece that I've been working on, which is a milonga, which is called Milonga by a wonderful guitarist and composer named Jorge Cardoso. Now, during my practice, I'm going to work on my challenges in sets so that interleaving is present through the entire demonstration, which is how I practice and how I recommend practicing in general. Now, I'm also going to show you when and how to vary these strategies. I'm going to do that during my demonstration so that you know that you're not locked into these strategies when you practice. You do want to be able to vary them a little bit. You know, everybody's different. Once again, these are preliminary studies, so they're very suggestive and not definitive. Use them as starting points. That's what I do. And then tweak them as needed. I'm looking at the sheet music on my screen right now. This is just going to be 9 measures of Jorge Cardoso's Milonga. And again, this is a section that I'm having a little bit of trouble with. However, I am familiar with this piece. I'm just working on some mechanical things that are kind of driving me nuts a little bit, and I want to work on improving them. So let's give it a shot. Now, my goal when I play this is to be expressive, and I want to play it roughly at around between 56 and 60 beats per minute. That's a quarter note, by the way. My goal is not to avoid errors. I want to let the errors occur naturally. When we're working on strategic practice, you want to just allow the errors to occur and correct them afterwards. If you try to avoid the errors, you're not going to improve. So allow them to occur and correct them. It's the correction and the effort in the correction that is going to help you improve fastest. Okay, here we go. Let's take it from the top. So again, expressive, around 56 to 60 beats per minute. That sounds like this. This is 2/4 time, by the way. Da, da, da. 1 E and a 2 E and a da, 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 da. So. Now there's my first error. So it's this E. See, you can already see what's going on. My second finger is way too far back in the fret. I need to push that forward. Now the way I'm going to do that, by the way, my solution is going to be to rotate. So this is my shape. Right? I think It's actually there. So I need to rotate a little bit and slide that finger just a little bit more. I don't really have a lot of room to slide it forward, just a little bit. So I need to apply a little bit of extra pressure. So 2 solutions, a little bit of rotation, a little extra pressure. Let's try that again, see if I can get that. This is challenge number 1. Now, actually, before I do this, I like to try to overcome my challenges at tempo, at the same tempo I just tried first. You don't need to do that. You can slow down immediately. For me, I like to usually give it 2 tries at tempo and then slow it down if needed. That was good. I got it. So 1 wrong, 1 right. Let's do another one. That's good. That's 2 right. I still not totally convinced, so let me do 1 more. Totally got it. All right, good. 75% success, right? I got 1 wrong and 3 correct. So I'm going to keep going past that point. So I'm going to start here. Wouldn't you know it, I have the same problem, right? Second finger is way too far back in there. That's a big stretch, right? So my solution is just to slip that forward. I have to get better at rotating and sliding my finger forward. So let's try that one. 2 mistakes, right? Let's adjust that real quick. Now, because I made a mistake the second time I tried it at tempo, I'm gonna slow down my next one. Okay, that was correct. Check that off. 2 correct. I need 3 more. Notice I'm speeding up now because I'm starting to feel comfortable with it. That's 3 correct. That's 4 correct. 1 more correct one, I'll be about 70%. Notice I'm back up to my tempo. Got it. I feel pretty good about that. Now notice I'm taking my hands off the guitar, I'm shaking them. It's not because they hurt, it's because I really like to rest my hands and give myself a little bit of a break between challenges, just for more stamina. And also there's some research that taking micro breaks actually helps you consolidate the information a little bit faster. It gives the brain an opportunity to replay the corrections that you've made and discard the errors so that you can improve faster. So give it a shot, please. I would recommend it. It's also going to help you avoid injuries, right? So moving forward, ended. So I ended there. Let me look at the sheet music. This is memorization challenge, challenge 3. It's memorization. So even if it's not mechanical, any kind of challenge that you're running into, that counts. If it's a memorization challenge, a mechanical challenge, or an expressive challenge, they're all challenges. We want to try to address them as they come up. So this is, I'm not even going to look at the sheet music. I'm going to try to remember this. There it is. Okay. So it's that third finger. So I had 1 mistake. I just did 2 correct, but I'm going to do 1 more. That was correct memorization wise, incorrect mechanically. See how flat my third finger is? That was because I have way too much tension in my hand. So let's relax that for a second. Let's try it again. Overcorrected. I'm going to take it right from here. At tempo correction. At tempo correction number 2. At tempo correction number 3. And remember, I've solved the memorization one. That's checked off. 1 more. A little too much tension, so I'm going to do 1 extra one. Again, now I'm past, I just did 75%. I'm going to go a little bit past it because I just don't feel quite right. And what don't I feel right about? I feel like there's still too much tension in my left hand. So I'm going to go even further, right, and try to resolve something else that I'm coming up with. Technically, it would be a different challenge, which is tension, but it's related to the mechanics. So I'm lumping that all in one group. Okay, let's keep going. So wrong note, that should be a B flat, not a B. So number 5. Sorry. So that's 1 wrong, 2 right. I'm just going to take it from here. So notice my correction. See that rotation that I did? 1 more just to solidify it. That was 1 wrong, 3 right. This is 4. I'm going to keep going. That's the end of the phrase, right? Nothing wrong there. I feel pretty good about that. Now, that was set number 1. Now, in set number 1, you can tell that I'm really observing the 70 to 85% success rate with some variability. And that's perfectly fine. Again, you have to adjust it and see how your body feels when you work on that. So I'm going to move now to set 2, and I'm going to repeat all of these same challenges. Now, I can do this in 2 different ways. Option 1, I can go directly to my challenges and work on them one at a time in sets. So in this case, I had 5, A, B, C, D, E, again, in order. Initially in order, eventually you want to randomize that, but we'll talk about that in another video. The other option is I can start my phrase from the top and address the errors as they come up again. Personally, I will mix it up, but I prefer to go right to the challenges first, right? So at the end of the day, it's going to be kind of in order, but I'm not spending too much time on the previous stuff like this. I don't need to play that again because I can play that already pretty well. So I'm going to go here. This is set 2. Still a little bit far back, right? It's better. There's less buzz. Let's try it again. Okay. 1 wrong, 1 right. 1 wrong, 2 right. 3 right. I'm going to keep going. I think that's good enough. That was right, but I cheated. I'm pressing way too hard with that finger instead of going forward. So sometimes this will happen. Just because a note is correct doesn't mean the mechanics are correct. So in this case, the mechanics are not correct because there's way too much pressure in my left hand. So I need to loosen that up. So let's go. So let's take it. Better. What I did there was rotate it and I leaned forward, so I have a lot more leverage in my fingers. 1 wrong, 1 right. 1 wrong, 2 right. It was a different buzz. I'm going to ignore that because it's not the focal point right now. And it's also not an error that I tend to make. So 3 right, 1 more just to solidify it. Keep going. Memorization, but I got it. I got it again. This is 2. So now something different is happening. I'm not making the memorization error anymore. So effectively, I'm doing overlearning, sort of. I'm basically tweaking overlearning, but I haven't made a mistake. Remember, in overlearning, it's if it takes you 2 to get the phrase right, then you need to repeat between 1 to 2 times, so 50 to 100% correct after your final repetition. In this case, I'm not making a mistake. I made a mistake in the first set, but not in the second one. So now I'm doing something related to overlearning, which is basically just repeating my correction to help solidify that even more. Again, basically, the more repetitions we make in general, the better. We want to keep our incorrect repetitions down, which is what I mentioned in the previous video. And our overall repetitions, we don't want to go too high because we're just going to injure ourselves. But in this case, I want to do a few more repetitions. Personally, I like to repeat 3 to 4 correct repetitions if everything's going right, and then move on, right? So memorization. And I'm kind of tackling 2 birds with 1 stone. This one is also right. I'm not making a mistake on that note. The pressure is correct. I'm landing it correctly. Feel good about that. I'm going to do that 1 more time. Unrelated error, ignoring. That one, same thing there. That B flat came up again. So I'm on the fret. What's going on? I need to bring my elbow in, rotate a little bit more. Okay, so from here, I'll take it from here. That's 1 right. That's 2 right. Unrelated error, ignoring that. Why am I ignoring that? It's because I don't ever really make that mistake. So I could apply the overlearning principle on that mistake. Right? I could look at that pinky independently. 50% of the time, I'm moving on, right? So I'm not gonna spend too much time working on that because I already know it well. Third finger, I think that's the third time that I've done it correctly. I'm moving on, right? Okay, that's it, that's set 2. Now I'm gonna do one more set, take a quick break. I usually take about a minute or so of a break. Now I'm gonna move on to set number 3. Now in set number 3, what I expect to happen is that I run across my errors fewer times. So I feel like I'm at my goal tempo-wise. Let's check that again. 2E and a 1E and a 2E and a... Actually, I'm faster than my goal tempo, right? And again, by the way, this piece is not intended to be played at a constant tempo. There's a lot of what's called tempo expression and variability, but this is a good baseline that I like to work with. So I can already feel like I'm way faster. So I'm actually gonna slow down and I'm gonna try to play a little closer to what my performance goal tempo would be. And what I expect to find is that I'm not gonna make as many errors. Essentially what's happening is that I'm lowering my probability of error because of the corrections that I've done and the strategies that I've implemented. So let's see what happens, okay? By the way, what I do like to do in my third set is use it as more of an observation set with some light corrections. So I basically lean more into overlearning, assuming that I've reached my goal. And if I don't make any mistakes, I'm not gonna repeat anything, all right? So let's see what happens. So here's my tempo, 1E and a 2E and a... Wouldn't you know it? I didn't make any mistakes. So for the purposes of this video, let's try one more. Normally, I wouldn't do this in my practice. I would say, okay, that feels pretty good. I feel really comfortable with that. I'm happy about that. I would celebrate it. And then I would move on to my next phrase in my piece that I'm working on that's giving me a lot of trouble. For now, let's just do one more and see what happens. Let's see, maybe we can force some errors to occur. I'm gonna try to play it a little bit faster. So let's try it. There it is, right? So tempo tends to be increased tempo. It tends to be a typical cause for errors. So if you're having a lot of errors, it's mostly probably you're playing it too fast, because you're playing it too fast, and because you're using too much physical effort, so too much pressure, too much force, too much tension in the body, right? So decrease the tempo, decrease the tension, and likely you're gonna be able to resolve the errors. So I made that mistake. I'm gonna try to fix it. 1. I hit the right note, but you can see where I am. I'm almost on top of the fret. Now this one, it's once again, the note is correct, but the mechanics aren't. I don't feel good about that. My hand doesn't feel right. I need to, again, be more rotated in so that this finger is behind the fret, not rather than on top of it, which is where it is right now. So 1 to correct. So I'm gonna try 50% overlearning. Let's go up to 100% overlearning. Let's stop there. I feel pretty good about that. Try not to go past that 100% mark if you're using overlearning, at least according to the research that I found on Noa Kageyama's website, bulletproofmusician.com. By the way, if you don't know that, you should definitely check that website out if you're interested in this kind of information. Noa Kageyama is awesome. His website is full of amazing resources on learning strategies and performance strategies, so check that out. Okay, so moving on, right? And then I'm done. So in this example, I had 2 points where I used overlearning, right? And one of them was at 50% and the second one was at 100%. Now, I would be done. I would be finished with my practice at this point. So I've covered now all of my challenges several times and in an interleaved manner across essentially 4 sets. So I hope that's really super clear on how that, how the 70% 70 to 85% strategy works, how the overlearning strategy works, how interleaving works, and again, I added another one, which is repeating corrections multiple times. So if anything goes well that I want to repeat, maybe I don't feel very good about it, but it's going well and I'm not making mistakes, then I will do extra repetitions and keep that at or near 100%. Again, that's our ultimate goal, is to be as close to 100% as possible so that when we perform, our probability of error is significantly lowered, right? So I want to mention a really quick note on interleaving. Right now I'm working in sets, and I'm focusing on very specific challenge spots, as you see, right? Every time a challenge or error comes up, I stop and I fix that, and that's what I've been interleaving. So I think this is really where we need to start. You need to focus on small, like I mentioned at the beginning, small phrases, specific challenges, but eventually when we overcome our challenges, we can work on interleaving in a much broader context. And that's really just to challenge ourselves so that we can get closer to our goal, right? Our ultimate goal. Maybe that could be an expressive goal or a tempo goal. Interleaving, by the way, is an excellent strategy for faster skill development and, of course, for better long-term retention of new information. But interleaving is certainly not the only strategy for retention. There are a lot more factors at play and a lot more strategies that we can use to improve both our short-term and long-term memorization of music, which, of course, I think obviously are absolutely crucial if we want to play really well, especially if we want to play on stage or for other people, even just for fun without having to stop and try to remember what comes next. So if that's the case for you, then you should definitely check out the next video on the screen where I detail the top strategies used for memorizing music. One note, it is a little fast-paced, so when you watch it, just make sure to adjust the speed on YouTube if needed, and you'll get much more out of the video. All right, thank you so much, everybody. See you next time. Bye-bye.